I just want to extend an official welcome to all of you and just thank you for joining us today for this deep dive into leadership that makes excellence repeatable. As promised, my colleague Ann Stott will be sharing strategies, tools, and a blueprint for helping leaders intentionally and purposefully create career-defining teams. We will pause a couple times throughout the presentation and also save some time for Q&A at the end. So please keep making noise in the chat throughout the session today. If something is resonating with you or inspiring your curiosity, we will get to your questions and comments. Quick word about Sweet Rush for those of you who may be newer to us. We were founded in 2001, which makes us exactly 25 years old. We are currently this summer celebrating our 25th birthday. And of course, we owe this amazing milestone to every single client partner and team member who has joined us at the table to practice the craft we all love. It has been a year of celebration. Actually, in January, we joined the NIIT family of world-class learning services. And we've been keeping the celebration going this award season. We are proud to share that we've received 24 new Brandon Hall Group HCM Excellence Awards in 10 unique categories. This year's programs have been super diverse, including everything from a skills-first training approach for HR professionals to role-based AI literacy training for a global workforce to really adrenaline-inducing, heart-pounding immersive learning for physicians and delivery drivers. We are so, so proud of our client partners for taking the leap with us and always daring us to think differently and keep innovating. So cheers to another year. Let's do it all again in 2027. And now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Ann Stott, who is a senior learning and talent strategy consultant and former chief learning officer who helps organizations build and scale talent and leadership strategies that prepare their people and their businesses for what's next. Ann brings a practical, business-focused perspective to developing leaders, building high-performing teams, and strengthening talent capacity at scale. She's also the published author of Grit Leadership, which you see pictured right here. Over to you, Ann.
Thank you, Tiffany. So I want everybody to take a minute and think about the best team that you've ever experienced. We've all been on this team. It may be a team you're currently on, it may be a team that you've led, but remember that team. And now I want you to think about what did it feel like and why did it work? Chances are, when you are in that experience, you were probably performing at your best. As a team, you were getting things done. You were achieving things beyond what you thought you could achieve. You trusted each other. You knew you could count on the people around you. And chances are you probably enjoyed the work. Even when it was hard, there was something about being part of that team that gave you energy. So let me ask you this question. Was it a fluke? Was it just the right people at the right time, the right things going on? Or could it have been leadership? Think about that. Think about the power if your current team that you're leading or the current team that you're working on could be the best team of your career. And now think about the superpower of that. Instead of looking back and saying, that was the best team of my career, what if people across your organization was saying, this is the best team of my career? What if you could take teams that are already good and make them exceptional? And then imagine doing that across your company. What would that mean for performance? What would it mean for your people? And ultimately, what could that mean for the success of your organization? So why does this matter now? Why is this such a critical piece at such a critical time? And I think it comes down to three things. Every organization needs high-performing teams, but very few know how to build them consistently. We've all seen great teams happen, but the question is, can we actually create them intentionally over and over again? Second, Leaders are being asked to deliver more with less. We're constantly seeing budget cuts, headcount cuts, fewer resources, but the expectations haven't gone down. In fact, if anything, they've gone up. And that makes the leadership behaviors that build great teams even more important. And then lastly, the best organizations don't wait for exceptional teams to happen. They intentionally create them. It's not that fluke. It's not that one time when you happen to have the right people at the right place at the right time. It's really thinking about, can we intentionally create the conditions where great teams happen again and again? Think of that superpower. But before we look at what it takes, I want to do a quick poll. Let me see where you guys are right now in your current leadership development focus. This will give me a feel for where everybody is and help me modify some of the content. So in the chat, just put, the letters A, B, C, or D. I'm designing a new leadership program. B, I'm refreshing an existing program. C, I'm scaling leadership across the organization. Or D, I'm exploring ideas for the future. All right, seeing a lot of C's, D's, a couple A's and B's. Great, we've got a nice blend of folks. Thank you for answering that question. So given your situation, and everybody has a different situation, and I think it's a nice blend, it's how do we make great teams repeatable? Most leaders attribute success to what we've talked about: right people, right time, great culture. And I bet when you thought about the best team you've ever been on, some of those things came to mind. We had the perfect people. It was the right time. We had a great culture. Well, what I'm arguing is that you can actually create the conditions that make those teams possible. You can build trust where people feel safe, being honest, taking risks, relying on one another. You can create a shared vision where people understand not only what you're trying to accomplish, but why it matters and how they contribute. You can build accountability where people know what's expected of them, their own commitments, and they hold one another high standards. And you can create commitment where people aren't just doing their jobs, they're invested in the team, in what you're trying to accomplish together. And I would argue that these are the conditions that create incredible teams. So if these are the conditions, the question really becomes, what leadership behaviors create them consistently? So let me introduce you to the GRIT framework. The whole premise behind GRIT is that leadership is not built in the big things. It's not that huge offsite meeting. It's not the big presentation. It's not the big town hall. I would argue that it's built through hundreds of intentional moments. It's how someone experiences you on a typical Wednesday morning. It's how you respond when something goes wrong. It's a conversation you have when somebody is struggling. Those are the moments that ultimately shape what it feels like to be in your team. And grit brings those moments together through 4 interconnected behaviors that help leaders build trust, navigate change, and create lasting impact. The first is genuine storytelling. This is all about making that connection with people, using stories and communication to help people understand you, understand the direction, and connect to something bigger. Then we have resilient thinking. How do you stay strong during the tough times? How do you maintain perspective, bring clarity, lead with positivity when things are difficult? Intentional influence is about those purposeful individual moments of influence. Recognizing how you show up and interact with someone can have an impact far beyond that one conversation. And lastly, transparent strength. This is all about being authentic in your presence, having confidence as a leader while still allowing people to see the person behind the leader. So let's dive in. Let's start with genuine storytelling. I want you to think about a senior leader speaking at a new hire orientation. They could start with, "Welcome to the company. We're so excited to have you," and then move right into the mission, vision, and strategy. Or they could start it this way. "I've been with this company for 10 years. I still remember my first day. I was completely overwhelmed. Everything was new. I was on information overload. And I remember going to lunch and coming back, and this is so embarrassing, I couldn't find my cubicle. I walked around 2 or 3 times before I finally had to ask someone, where does Sheila sit? Because I knew I sat next to Sheila." Talk about embarrassing. So if you're feeling overwhelmed today, that's completely normal. Every person in this company has had their first day. And someday you're going to have your own story to tell about yours. Think about that difference. I can still go on as a leader and talk about the mission, the strategy, all of those important things. But you've done something first. You've created a connection. They don't just see you as a leader, they see you as a human being who remembers what it feels like to be exactly where they are. And that's genuine storytelling. That's an intentional leadership moment. So I think I've driven this point home with examples, but stories don't just communicate information, they create connection. And let me give you an example of how we've brought this to life. We had an organization that had 3 distinct business cultures that were struggling to understand one another's perspectives. They had a powerful instructor-led leadership program designed to build self-awareness and help people understand how their experiences show up at work. The challenge was scale. In an entire year, the classroom program reached about 900 people. And they believed this deeply personal experience really needed to be face to face to happen. We worked with the client and helped them rethink differently. They created an immersive blended virtual experience using storytelling, self reflection, facilitated practice, and coaching. They're helping people explore how the personal experiences shape workforce behavior and shift conversations from judgment to curiosity. The result, more than 3,500 employees completed the program. Remember, we only had 900 when we were doing it face to face. That's a 310% increase in reach. And 90% said that it would improve their job performance. So we took something deeply human and figured out how to deliver it at scale. And let me show you how storytelling made that possible. This is where the design, I think, I'm a learning nerd, of course, gets really cool. They created these characters, Harold, Amy, Malik, Bridget, and brought them to life through stories. You didn't just learn leadership concepts from them. You got to know them, their personalities, their experiences, even their childhood stories, and began to understand why they showed up the way they did. And the learning itself was designed differently. Instead of constantly stopping for the traditional knowledge checks, did you get the right answer? They built in reflection. What did that story bring up for you? What experience have shaped you? How might your own story influence the way you show up with other people? And that's where storytelling becomes so powerful. Because as people understood the stories behind these characters and reflected on their own stories, the question began to shift from why are they behaving this way to what might I be missing? That's a very, very different leadership mindset. You're replacing judgment with curiosity and you're building empathy. And when that starts happening across an organization, storytelling isn't just a learning technique anymore. It becomes a way to shape culture. So let's go on to resilient thinking. And great leaders don't wait for certainty. They're able to lead through uncertainty. I want you to think about this. You're having a super busy week. It's high pressure. You've got deadlines, meetings, problems coming at you from every direction. And have you ever thought, I'm sure you have, because I know I have done this myself. Okay, I'm going to do all my good people management stuff next week. Right now, I just need to put my head down and get through this week. But what happens is next week is just as crazy, and the following week is just as crazy. And so here's the problem is pressure doesn't pause leadership. It reveals it. Because during these high pressure moments, teams are taking their emotional cues from their leader. If that leader looks stressed, acts stressed, starts reacting to everything, they might not even realize the impact that's having on the team. And oftentimes, those are the moments that define how people experience their leadership. Resilient leaders do something different. They create calm, they create clarity, they create confidence when people need it most. So imagine a leader bringing the team together and saying, we have a lot coming at us right now, and these deadlines are aggressive. So let's really get clear about what matters most. Here are the 3 things we need to accomplish this week. Here's what can wait. And if something gets in your way, bring it to me and we're going to work through it together. Think about what that leader just did. They didn't pretend that the pressure wasn't there. They created clarity in the middle of it. And that's resilient thinking. So we've defined resilient thinking, but how do we actually teach leaders to do this? Resilience is hard to teach. You can't put somebody in a classroom, talk to them about resilience for an hour, and expect them to suddenly become more resilient. But you can give them opportunities to practice it. Think about a leadership program where instead of giving leaders a case study with all the information neatly laid out, you intentionally give them incomplete information. They have to make a decision. And then halfway through the exercise, you change something else. The deadline moves, a key person leaves, the budget gets cut, but new information consistently comes in. Now they have to decide, oh boy, how do I respond? How do I communicate with my team? What changes? What stays the same? And most importantly, am I showing up as a leader while all of this is happening? That's how we start to build resilient leaders. We create scenarios, we create simulations, and we give them the opportunities to make decisions under pressure. Reflect on what happened, get feedback, and try it again. And that's why I love this line is resilience is built through practice, not prediction. And I love this line too, now that I'm talking about lines I love, is leadership is the quiet promise we make in the calm and the roaring truth we prove in the chaos. Think about that. It's so true. You know, it's easy to be a good people leader and a good manager on the good days. The real test is how you show up when things get hard, when there's pressure, when there's uncertainty, when your team is looking to you for that calm, that clarity, that confidence. And that's why we need to help leaders build resilient thinking before they need it. So when those moments come, they're prepared to show up as the leader their team needs. So, Tiffany, before I go into an example that will showcase this, I'm wondering, I haven't been watching the chat. Has any questions come in?
Folks have been pretty quiet since the poll, but I do want to encourage everyone to share their experience or make a connection, make a comment, ask a question.
Okay, great. Let me keep going then. So, here's another example of what this can look like in practice. Our client wanted to help new managers build the behaviors they would need to navigate the everyday challenges of leading people. They had defined 10 core manager behaviors, and they created a series of short micro learning experiences around them. The one I'm showing here right now is show care. What I love about this example is how authentic it is. These aren't actors, they're not highly paid, polished corporate videos. These are real managers from the organization recording themselves, sharing their own stories, their experiences, and practical tips about how they lead. It's intentionally a little bit more scrappy and real, and that's what makes it incredibly relatable. But managers weren't just watching videos, they were reflection activities. Interactive journaling were built right into the experience, asking them to think about the behavior meant for them and how they could apply it with their teams. And that's a connection to resilient thinking. We don't want leaders figuring out how to respond for the first time when they're already under pressure. We're helping them build and practice small leadership habits ahead of time. So when the difficult moment comes, they have something to draw on. So now let me show you what one of those videos actually looked like. And let's go ahead and play that video if you don't mind, Tiffany.
I've had a couple reorgs on teams that I've supported, and what's really important for me during those is showing care. I can think of one where I started getting some feedback that something was just a little bit off. And so, perfect. The team trusts me enough to share this information. Now I can go a little bit deeper. Going deeper meant that I had one-on-ones with everybody on the team just to check in. And that really illuminated some breaking points of how we operated as a team. So we made some structural changes to the team based on that. People process change differently. And for some people, it's, yeah, I can't wait to get into it. For others, no thanks. I don't need change to disrupt other parts of my life. I've already got enough going on. And so me tailoring one-on-ones where I could share the direction we're going, the information that I had, what I think is coming, both brings people along in that change journey, but it also opens up for some of the insights that I wouldn't get on my own as manager. So sharing the direction of where we're going, sharing the output and the changes in the organization early, either in one-on-ones directly with those people who are affected or in a post to the team with a visual to go with it, means that then we can have the discussion because everybody's on the same page, and it helps for a successful reorg.
So did you notice the storytelling? He's not telling you what to do. He's sharing his own experiences and what he's learned along the way. So he made that connection. But look at what else he demonstrated. He was going through change himself, but he was able to step back and recognize what his team needed from him in that moment. Rather than simply pushing forward, he created the space for the team to talk, to reflect, to make sense of what was happening. And what's interesting is it didn't just help the team, it gave him greater insight and clarity as a leader as well. So let's move on to our next quadrant, which is intentional influence. And influence is not built in those big moments. And we've talked about those moments, the town hall, the big presentation, the big offsite meeting. Influence is earned in the small moments. So many of the moments that actually shape how people experience our leadership never actually appear on a calendar. It's not a meeting, it's how you show up, taking time to ask a thoughtful question and really listening to the answer. It's taking 2 minutes to write a handwritten note and to thank someone or let them know you appreciate what they did. Or it's simply doing a genuine check in with someone. How are you doing? Not just that casual, how you doing? But really, how are you doing? Because you know that they've got a really big workload right now. Think about how much that would mean to you when you're feeling overwhelmed to have your boss genuinely reach out and ask, I want to check in with you and how you're doing. These aren't big things, but they're intentional things. And this is probably one part of grit that you, as a participant, can walk out of this webinar and start doing this afternoon. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little challenge. Before the end of today, I want you to choose one person and create one intentional moment with that person. Make the call, ask the question, send the note, do the check-in. Because over time, these small moments become the leadership experience that people remember. So how do we develop intentional influence? Again, you can't really teach influence by putting it on a slide and explaining. You have to give leaders opportunities to practice it. And I think a big part of this is helping leaders slow down enough to notice the moments that matter. Have them reflect on their everyday interactions. Where did I build trust today? Where might I have unintentionally diminished it? What can I do differently tomorrow? Because intentional influence isn't really about mastering one big leadership technique. It's about practicing small behaviors often enough that they become how you naturally lead. And I can't emphasize enough the staying power of those little things. A 2-minute interaction can stay with someone for years. That's why intentional influence grows through these repeated behaviors, not occasional moments. People don't remember every speech their leader gives. In fact, I would argue they probably remember very few or none of them. But what they do remember is how their leader made them feel on just an ordinary Tuesday. Okay, I've got a really good example. I love this one. So let me show you what intentional influence can look like in practice. The client wanted something fresh and different for their leaders, not another lengthy leadership program. So they created a 3-week experience built around a really simple idea. Think small. Every week, leaders receive short, engaging content, thought-provoking questions, expert videos, curated resources. But the real differentiator was the leadership dares. People chose a small action, some taking as little as 30 seconds, and tried it with their team and reflected on what happened. So what I love is that SweetRush partnered with their client and treated this almost like a behavior change campaign, not just a training program. They created excitement around key moments. They watched the user data every week and adjusted the campaign based on what they were seeing. And participation began to grow organically as leaders shared the experience with other leaders. So you had a great learning design combined with a really smart engagement strategy. It got leaders interested. It gave them something small and practical to try, and it kept building momentum. That's intentional influence. Leadership isn't always about the big moment. It's that small, deliberate things we choose to do every day. So let me show you a quick sample of what that experience actually looked like, because I think these graphics are really cool.
You always hear people say, think big. But what if we think small? When you think small, you can save lives. And you can even feed the world. And see things that were right in front of you the whole time. That's why we are inviting you to Rise and Thrive. Rise and Thrive is a one-of-a-kind experience. to help leaders like you make small changes that have a big impact with material tailored to your needs and fit for your lifestyle. Rise and Thrive will help you discover small things you can do to inspire your teams, balance your workload, and empower performance beyond what you previously thought was possible. We already know you're an extraordinary leader. That's why Rise and Thrive is there to help you work on the small things so we can do something big together. Get access now by signing up for the 3-week Kickstart to Rise and Thrive.
Don't you love how engaging and visually different that feels? And how right from the start, it reinforces this idea that it's the small moments that make the biggest difference. So let's go on to our next quadrant and move on to transparent strength. And this is probably my favorite quadrant of all 4. The strongest leaders know when vulnerability builds trust. Let me share a story with you. I was at a national sales meeting. There were probably 900 people in the audience, and the head of sales goes up to speak. She was incredibly strong leader, confident, accomplished, someone who really commanded a room. And she told us a story about a mistake she made. She talked about a time when she had managed work-life balance particularly well and the impact that had on her personally. She was intentionally being vulnerable. And I can tell you this, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Here was this incredibly strong leader standing in front of 900 people, sharing something deeply personal, not just for the sake of being vulnerable, but because there was something she wanted us to learn from her experience. That moment probably happened 8, 9 years ago, and I can still see it crystal clear today. And I don't think I ever saw her as a stronger leader than I did in that one vulnerable moment. And that is the essence of transparent strength. That's what we need to help leaders develop. The judgment, not just the confidence, but the judgment to know when vulnerability strengthens their leadership. Now, transparent strength is a little tricky because it's not always appropriate to be vulnerable as a leader. And there are really 4 dimensions that can help us decide when vulnerability strengthens leadership and when it doesn't. The first one is motivation. So before you share something vulnerable, ask yourself, why am I sharing this? Am I sharing because I need something? I need to vent. I need reassurance. I need people to understand what I'm going through. Or am I sharing because there's something my team can gain from hearing it? Think back to the sales leader I described. She wasn't sharing that story because she needed something from us. She shared it because there was something she wanted us to learn from her experience. So the question is really simple. Who is this vulnerability serving? Me or the people I lead? The second dimension is impact. Before you share something vulnerable, ask yourself, what is this going to do for my team? For example, maybe I'm frustrated with a decision the company has made, and I share that frustration with my team. It may feel authentic in the moment. What have I just created? Have I helped them? Or have I created more anxiety and uncertainty? On the other hand, if what I share helps the team learn, grow, feel more connected, that vulnerability can have a positive impact. So the question here is simply, Will sharing this leave my team stronger, or will it leave them carrying something they didn't need to carry? The third dimension is trust. I want you to ask yourself, what is the level of trust that already exists between me and this person or this team? This is a critical one because vulnerability doesn't automatically create trust. In fact, I'd argue the opposite. There has to be enough trust for vulnerability to be received the way you intended. If trust is low, someone may hear what you share and think, why are they telling me this? What am I supposed to do with this? But when trust is already strong, that same vulnerability can deepen the relationship and create an even more authentic connection. So the question here is there enough trust for this vulnerability to strengthen the relationship? This is a big one. You've really got to have a good judgment for that. And the last dimension is perceived strength. And what I mean by that is how established are you in their eyes as a credible, capable leader? If that perception isn't strong yet, I would be very thoughtful and very cautious about being vulnerable. You need to build that credibility first. Give people confidence in your ability to lead before you ask them to interpret vulnerability as a strength. But when that perceived strength is high, vulnerability can actually deepen the connection and respect. Think back to the sales leader I talked about. We already saw her as an incredibly strong, capable leader. So when she stood in front of 900 people and allowed herself to be vulnerable, it didn't diminish her strength. It actually amplified it. So had we not had that confidence in her as a leader, that exact same story could have landed very differently. So the question here is, have I established enough credibility for my vulnerability to be seen as a strength? So when you put all four dimensions together, I don't think you have to be all the way to the right on every single one before you can demonstrate transparent strength. But I do think there's a target zone. They need to be leaning towards that right-hand side. For motivation and impact is really about what you're choosing to share. Why am I sharing it? Who is it serving? And is sharing it going to leave my team better off? And the other two, these are the critical ones, and that is trust and perceived strength. They're a little different. They need to be well established. Before I choose to be vulnerable, I want people to trust me, and I want them to already see me as a credible, capable leader. Because when those things are in place, vulnerability doesn't diminish your leadership. It actually strengthens it. You make an enormous connection with your people. And that's really what transparent strength is about. It's not vulnerability for vulnerability's sake. It's having the judgment to know when being vulnerable will make you a stronger leader. So transparent strength isn't about saying more. It's about sharing what builds trust. And notice what all four dimensions have in common. None of them are asking whether you're being vulnerable. They're asking whether your vulnerability serves a team. And I think that's the distinction between vulnerability and transparent trust. And I think that's the beauty of grit. Your leaders don't have to wait for that big leadership moment to start practicing these behaviors. In their very next meeting, they can tell a story that creates connection. They can pause and bring calm when things feel uncertain. They can create one intentional moment with somebody, or they could choose to share something that builds trust. These are behaviors they can practice every day, And when those behaviors become habits, leadership becomes repeatable. And when you build that capability across your organization, that's how you begin to create the conditions for great teams consistently, not by accident. So let me give you one final example that I think embodies all of the different components we've talked about. And this is a flagship leadership example. And I'm using it because I think it brings so much of what we've talked about together. The challenges here were enormous. We had 90,000 managers global. Can you imagine that? 90,000 managers with a goal of helping them shift from transactional supervisors to more collaborative, connected leaders. So SweetRush and the client didn't approach this as a course. They co-designed an immersive 4.5-month leadership journey built around practice, social learning, real-world application, and reinforcement. Right from the beginning, leaders are placed into a small peer pod that stays together throughout the journey. They discuss real leadership challenges. They learn from one another. They even rotate leadership of the pod. So think right there. Think about transparent strength. Leaders have to be willing to share what they're struggling with, learn from others, and recognize that they don't have to have all the answers. And then look at the breadth of experience: micro-learning, peer sessions, case studies, interactive practice, team rituals, and a capstone. This isn't a learn it one time and hope you remember. It's learn it, practice it, apply it, get feedback, and then do it again for over 4.5 months. And this is where you really start to see the creativity and the depth of the solution. SweetRush and their client built realistic digital simulations, interactive practice, case studies, and tools leaders could take directly back to their work. One of my favorite things about this is they created a digital card game that small groups of leaders can play together virtually without a facilitator. They're given a leadership situation, they make choices, and then discuss different perspectives and learn from how other leaders would approach the same challenge. That's resilient thinking in action. We're not telling leaders, here's the right answer. We're putting them into a realistic situation and asking, what's happening? What are my options? How would I respond? And then you have intentional influence, because they're taking these behaviors out of the learning environment and deliberately applying them back with their teams over and over throughout the journey. This program has been incredibly successful. You can see the 98% recommendation score, and across the bottom are all the awards this received, including numerous Brandon Hall Excellent Awards. So it wasn't just an innovative design, it was an award-winning leadership experience built to create real behavior change at enormous scale. And look at the feedback, and this is really what matters. Here's what leaders themselves told us. One said, it shifted my perspective. That's resilient thinking. Another talks about how valuable it was to discover that other managers were facing the same challenges and to learn from their experiences. That's transparent strength. Another says, I got practical tools I could use immediately. That's intentional influence. And that's why I wanted to finish with this example, because grit isn't 4 concepts we teach leaders and then send them back to work. We create moments where leaders can experience these behaviors, practice them, learn from one another, apply them in the real world, and reinforce them over time. And when you can do that for 90,000 leaders, you're no longer just delivering leadership development. You're building leadership capability at scale. So let's get back to the question I asked you at the very beginning. Think about the best team you've ever experienced. At the beginning, I asked you, was it a fluke? Was it just the right people, the right time, under the right circumstances? Or could it have been leadership? I hope after our time together today, you're thinking about that question a little differently. Can you build your best team again? I firmly believe you can. But leadership has to become intentional. Exceptional teams don't just happen, they're built. And they're built when organizations intentionally teach the leadership behaviors that matter, giving leaders opportunities to practice them, reinforcing those behaviors over time, and then finding ways to scale them across the organization. Because ultimately, leadership becomes culture when behaviors become habits. And imagine what becomes possible when great teams are no longer the exception. When you create an organization where more and more people can say, this is the best team I've ever been a part of. That's the opportunity in front of us as learning leaders today. So I want to pause now. First of all, I want to take some questions, but I want to thank you for spending time with me today. I know how busy your schedules are, and for you to take an hour out of your day, I really appreciate it. If you'd like to continue this conversation, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to stay connected. I'd personally love to stay connected with you on LinkedIn. So there's a QR code right there. Feel free to connect with me. And so Tiffany, I'm going to throw it over to you and see if there's any questions I can help answer.
Oh, sure thing. There are a couple of really good ones. So, Muhammad was wondering, for motivation, I've often experienced how it varies from person to person in what they perceive as impactful, which can be the opposite for their team. How to align and bring both leader and team on the same page here.
I think motivation is tricky. You're right, because everybody is motivated by different things. And I think understanding what motivates your team and adapting your style, whether it's per person, some people really get motivated by recognition. Some people get motivated by getting an award. Some people get motivated by just simply doing a great job. But I think understanding the motivations of individuals, because you probably don't have a motivation for an entire team that's the same, but working with those individuals, I think, is so important.
Great. Thanks, Anne. Nadia has a few questions rolled in here, and it really is founded in time. That's where it all starts. So Nadia asks, when you implement such learning experiences that take a few months, like that last one, how do you resolve the issue of little to no time leaders usually have for learning? They're oftentimes resistant to such learning as their calendars and lives are too busy. What if they say they don't have time for learning like that on top of everything else they have to take care of? Do you enforce it, make it required, ask them to block time on calendars anyway, or provide incentives? What kinds of things can motivate them to take such journeys?
Oh, I like the idea of incentives. That's a really good idea. I think it's always a challenge when you have a lengthy program for people to stay with the program till the end. And so I think that's always a challenge. And it's always a challenge finding time on calendars. People are busy, especially the higher you go in the leadership, the more difficult it is. I think things that make programs successful are the things that are they getting value out of it? So are you hitting that low hanging fruit right out of the gate so they can see that buy-in and say, oh, wow, wait a minute. This is going to help me do my job better. This might be worth my time. I also think as you get more senior in the organization, the more you can have application exercises. So rather than doing theoretical in the classroom discussions, have it be an assignment, have them actually bring a challenge that they have at work with a team or with a broader work environment, and how do they solve it? So I think making it very relevant is good. And then I think a lot of the examples I gave were very short touch points. They weren't an hour e-learning. Some of them were 3 minutes here, 30 seconds there. And I think doing those short wins and then the marketing of the program is so important, because sometimes we launch the program and we figure everybody's going to be as excited as we are about that program, of course, and they're not necessarily. And so I think gaining that buy-in from senior management so that, hey, your people are going through this program. Let me talk about what they're going to learn and what they're going to see. So you get that senior buy-in. And then I think just a great marketing campaign. And that was one of the examples we had with the start small focus. Those things were going out constantly on a weekly basis. They were getting buzz, they were getting reminded, and it really got people engaged. And we saw uptake increase over time because of that consistent approach.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, I remember that program even built some FOMO around it. So people were afraid that they were missing out on something,
Yeah.
which is rare, that people join in the middle or different points in the program. Thank you so much. That was everything I saw in terms of
Okay.
questions. Yeah, those were very insightful, in-depth questions. Um, Give folks maybe one more moment and really invite them to stay connected. I know these are things that might strike you later. You might have a question you want to reach out to Anne and ask, or just kind of bat some ideas around. I know Anne's always up for that.
Yeah, please do. I mean it sincerely. Please reach out. I love talking about leadership. Would love to hear the challenges that you have and any suggestions that I may have, or I wouldn't quite say words of wisdom, but maybe words of experience might be better for me to say that. But please reach out and definitely connect on LinkedIn. I look forward to seeing some invites out there. And I just want to thank everybody for their time. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you got some good stuff out of this session.
Thank you so much, folks. Thank you, Anne. It's been a wonderful session. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening. I'm seeing some accolades coming in, so thank you so much, folks. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.